Admiral Vorth stood at the forward viewport of the Korth Dominion flagship Invincible Spear, watching another human colony burn. The orange glare of detonating reactors bathed his face in flickering light, a glow he no longer found thrilling. There was no challenge anymore. These mammals died too easily, scurrying into shelters like frightened insects while his ships reduced their towns and defense grids to ash. "Sector secured, Admiral," said Commander Relth, his voice carrying the same smug boredom Vorth felt. "Minimal losses. Estimated survivors. Negligible." Vorth barely glanced at him. "Do the humans ever learn?" Relth smirked, a cruel flash of teeth. "If they do, it will be long after their extinction." The bridge crew chuckled, a sound like dry metal scraping over metal. War had become routine: scan, strike, silence. One more primitive settlement erased from the star maps. Their fleets met little resistance. Humans begged for help on open channels, crying to any species who might listen. The Korth answered only with orbital fire. On a secondary screen, the latest transmission replayed. "This is the colony of Rydell Prime. We are under attack. Please, anyone, send aid." The voice cracked into static as bombardment cut power to the colony's grid. Relth leaned lazily against the railing. "Pathetic, isn't it? Pleading to the void. As if anyone would risk our wrath to save them." The crew laughed again. Even Vorth allowed himself a thin smile. The humans called to allies that did not exist. No one had challenged Korth supremacy for centuries. This backwater species would not be the first. "Intercepted another SOS," Relth reported, scrolling through tactical data. "Origin, fringe world near the Orion Passage. Calls itself Earth Command Node 7. Sounds important." Vorth flicked a talon across the display. Another outpost, another desperate cry. The Dominion fleet moved on instinct now, each battle identical to the last. But routine could be comforting. Predictable. Safe. "Plot the course," Vorth ordered. "Let them see how quickly their pleas are answered." Hours later, the fleet slid from jump space, a formation of dark, gleaming warships drifting into the system like blades through smoke. The planet below rotated slowly, its single defense station powering up as the invaders arrived. "Another depot," Relth observed. "Minimal defenses, just as predicted." Vorth nodded. "Commence strike pattern. No survivors." Weapons charged, lances of blue light slicing through the void. Explosions blossomed across the station's hull. A few human ships lifted from the surface, small, outdated frigates armed with kinetic weapons that posed no threat at this range. They didn't even fire before retreating toward the planet's far side. Relth sneered. "Running already. Typical." But Vorth frowned. Their withdrawal lacked the usual panic. No chaotic comms chatter, no desperate civilians screaming into open channels. Just silence. "Strange," he muttered. Minutes later, the defense station tore apart in a final detonation, fragments tumbling into the atmosphere below. Human distress calls had already gone silent. "Objective complete," Relth said. "Shall we pursue the fleeing ships?" Vorth considered, watching the tactical feed. Those frigates hadn't fled toward human space at all. They'd retreated deeper into unclaimed sectors, transmitting nothing, moving with purpose. "No," he decided. "Destroy the depot completely, then regroup." Relth gave a small shrug, masking his confusion. As fire consumed the planet's only defense hub, Vortha's eyes narrowed. Something felt wrong. Hours later, Dominion scouts swept the system. No civilian traffic. No survivors. Entire settlements abandoned before the fleet even arrived. Supplies intact. Power grids active. Not the usual chaos of evacuation, more like everything had been packed up and moved in perfect order. One scout captain reported in. "Admiral, we found data caches left behind. Military records, fleet positions, wide open. Almost too easy." Relth grinned. "Perhaps these humans are dumber than we thought." But Vorth didn't reply. He was staring at the strategic maps now streaming onto his displays. Human colonies forming neat, concentric arcs across multiple sectors. Supply lines withdrawn along deliberate corridors. Civilian outposts abandoned in patterns that almost looked designed. The thought settled cold in his mind. This wasn't retreat. It was repositioning. Admiral. Another voice interrupted. Long-range sensors detect human transmissions repeating system-wide. Encrypted. Decrypt it, Vorth ordered. Moments passed. Then a voice came through, calm, clear, almost conversational. Phase 2 confirmed. Proceed to secondary positions. Initiate signal blackout. The bridge fell silent. Ralph frowned. Not a distress call? No, Vorth said slowly. Orders. To someone still here. The Dominion fleet continued searching, but found only empty settlements, silent cities, perfectly functional infrastructure left behind like bait. Finally, Ralph growled. Let them run. We'll find the rest soon enough. Vorth didn't answer. He stood at the viewport, watching the stars beyond the system's edge. Something about that human transmission clung to his thoughts. The lack of fear, the precision of their withdrawal, the tone of command rather than desperation. Admiral? Ralph prompted. Vorth turned at last. Set course for the nearest human colony cluster. If they want to hide, we'll drag them into the open. Ralph smirked again, confidence returning. They should have begged for mercy while they had the chance. Vorth said nothing, gaze drifting back to the empty planet below. The humans hadn't begged at all. They'd let the Dominion strike, and then vanished without a trace. When the fleet jumped out of the system, the abandoned colony continued transmitting on loop, a single automated signal pulsing through the void long after the attackers left. It repeated one phrase in multiple languages, none of which the Korth recognized. Translated later, it would read, confirmed. They took the bait. The Korth Dominion's High Admiral Vorth stood at the heart of his flagship's command deck, arms folded behind his back, staring at the void where the human colony had been just hours ago. It wasn't the destruction that unsettled him. He had ordered such things countless times. It was the silence that followed. No emergency signals had rippled through human space. No frantic calls for aid or scattershot evacuation fleets clogging the void with panic. The humans had simply gone quiet. His first officer, Kreth, approached carefully, mindful of the High Admiral's temper. Scouting parties report the colony's data cores were decoys, sir. Entire communications grid was a sham. Vorth's expression didn't change, but his jaw tightened. Impossible. Backwater primitives don't orchestrate tricks like this. Yet, Kreth said carefully, every scrap of intelligence we recovered was falsified. They led us here, High Admiral. A ripple of unease passed across the deck. Vorth heard it in the sudden restraint of voices, the sudden stillness. He dismissed Kreth with a sharp gesture, but the thought burrowed in. Let us hear. Moments later, the first human transmission arrived. The voice was calm. No demands. No threats. Just 3 words, delivered in a measured tone devoid of fear. Phase 2 confirmed. And then silence again. Vorth played it twice, studying every nuance. No static. No trembling urgency. Just calm acknowledgement, as though they were ticking boxes on a checklist whose end he could not see. That night, if one could call the artificial dimming of the ship's corridors night, Vorth watched the war logs his scouts had brought back. Old recordings, grainy and uneven, ripped from human networks. The first showed cities burning under their own banners. Armies clashing with primitive but ferocious weapons. He watched trenches fill with mud and blood under gray skies. Soldiers charged through gas and fire while machines belched shells the size of drop pods. In another clip, cities vanished in white-hot light as primitive bombs turned night to day. These were their own wars? Kreth asked, appalled. Vorth said nothing. He leaned forward as another recording played. 2 human soldiers dragging each other from the wreckage of a battlefield, coughing, bleeding, yet laughing as though this hell was ordinary. Millennia of killing each other, he thought. Entire civilizations forged under constant violence. Predators eating predators until only the hardest remained. When the last recording ended, he sat in silence. His officers shifted uncomfortably, waiting for orders, for reassurance, for anything. Finally, Vorth rose. "Summon the Fleet Council," he ordered. The council chamber filled quickly with hard-eyed admirals and governors projecting in from distant sectors. Their holograms wavered like ghosts above the table. "This is an overreaction," drawled Governor Selvek, scales gleaming in the artificial light. "One raid goes astray, and suddenly you call for war councils? They are vermin, Vorth. Clever vermin, perhaps, but vermin all the same." "Vermin," Vorth repeated softly. He touched the control panel, and the images of human wars sprang up around the chamber. Cities burning, bombs falling, soldiers locked in hand-to-hand combat among ruins. This is what vermin do to each other. Tell me, Selvek, what will they do to us? A long silence followed. One of the younger admirals shifted uneasily. Perhaps a containment fleet. Strike hard. End it before they... Before they what? Vorth snapped, the first crack of anger breaking his usual composure. Before they adapt? Because they will. I've seen it already. Their ships appear, strike, vanish. Minimal losses, maximum damage. No panic. No wasted motion. Every battle so far has been their design, not ours. Governor Selvek flicked his tail dismissively. You sound afraid. I am cautious, Vorth corrected coldly. But fear was the word hanging in the air, unspoken but present. The debate spiraled, half the council demanding overwhelming force to crush humanity before they became a threat, the other half scoffing at the very idea that primitives from a single backwater world could threaten the Dominion's centuries of supremacy. Vorth listened, silent, his thoughts circling like carrion birds. When the meeting ended with no clear directive, only the usual politics and posturing, he stood alone at the viewport, watching the stars slide by. He thought of the soldiers in those ancient human wars laughing through blood and fire. He thought of the calm voice saying, "Phase 2 confirmed." And for the first time in his long, merciless career, High Admiral Vorth wondered if he was no longer the hunter. 2 days later, the human fleet arrived. No speeches. No grandiose threats. Just a simple transmission across every Korth frequency. Withdraw or be destroyed. The bridge crew erupted in laughter at first. Primitive ships, smaller in number, half the Dominion size at best. What could they possibly do? Vorth didn't laugh. He watched the tactical holos carefully as the first engagement began. The humans didn't charge. They didn't strafe wildly or scream defiance over open channels. They moved with eerie precision, slipping through Korth formations like scalpels through flesh. Communications blacked out sector by sector. Supply lines severed in minutes. Forward scouts vanished before reporting a single shot fired. Within the hour, 2 Dominion cruisers simply stopped responding. Not destroyed, silent. Dead in space, systems gutted by something unseen. And always, that same calm voice before each strike. Target neutralized. Proceeding. By nightfall, the laughter was gone. On the command deck of his flagship, Vorth felt the weight settle on his shoulders like ice. He gave no orders for retreat, yet, but the thought crept in like a shadow. The Dominion had expected desperation, chaos, the flailing rage of a cornered species. What they got instead was a predator wearing the face of prey. And as the stars burned cold beyond the viewport, Vorth understood the central truth taking shape with every passing hour. The humans had been preparing for this war long before the Dominion even knew it existed. He didn't yet know how far that preparation went. But as the human fleet vanished into the dark between strikes, leaving only wreckage and silence behind, one thing became certain. This was only the beginning. Admiral Vorth had not slept in 2 cycles. Reports streamed across his command deck, fragmented, contradictory, soaked in panic. Frontier worlds abandoned. Military outposts gone silent mid-transmission. Supply lines dissected with surgical precision. The human fleet struck like lightning, appearing from wormholes the Dominion could neither predict nor trace, dismantling entire sectors before vanishing into the void. And yet the casualties were minimal. Ships disabled, not destroyed. Garrisons scattered, not slaughtered. It felt deliberate, as though humanity was not simply winning a war, but shaping it into something larger, something colder. Vorth stood at the center of it all, every sensor feed casting pale light across his scaled face. His officers avoided his eyes now. Days ago, they had laughed openly at the first human demands for withdrawal. Now, they whispered in corners, flinched at sudden alerts, watched their admiral as if waiting for him to break the silence and admit what none dared to say aloud. The Dominion was losing. A transmission arrived from Dominion High Command, another demand for reassurance disguised as an inquiry. Vorth ignored it. High Command still clung to the illusion of control, issuing orders as if names on paper and numbers in fleets could undo the fear spreading faster than any human weapon.
Fear.
Yes, that was the true contagion now. He saw it in the admirals who joined the council by hologram, voices tight, eyes darting off-screen as if expecting human fleets to materialize behind them. One governor even argued for immediate negotiations, only to be shouted down by rivals clinging to pride like a shield. Vorth ended the council early, claiming tactical matters required his focus. The truth was simpler. Their bickering disgusted him. He left the chamber and walked the quiet corridors of his flagship, thoughts heavy as the hum of its engines. Once, the Dominion had been a machine of conquest, its admirals raised from birth to believe in its inevitability. Now, for the first time in centuries, inevitability had shifted to the other side. He found Kreth waiting in the strategy bay, poring over intercepted human transmissions. The younger officer's usual stiffness was gone, his posture slumped, his eyes shadowed by exhaustion. "They don't gloat," Kreth said without turning. Every victory, every strike, no triumph in their voices. Just confirmation, like they're checking tasks off a list. Vorth studied the holomap. Dominion space, once a solid mass of authority, now looked riddled with cracks where human fleets had cut deep, splitting sectors apart before moving on. No pattern High Command could predict. No front lines to reinforce. "Have we identified their commander?" Vorth asked. "Only a name," Kreth said. "Admiral Reyes. No image. No speeches. Just orders, precise and brief. Their soldiers speak of her like she sees the entire war before it happens. A single human name, faceless, was dismantling an empire." Vorth remembered watching those ancient human war logs, the soldiers laughing through smoke and fire. He wondered if Reyes laughed like that too, calm amid destruction, certain of survival where others saw only chaos. An alert interrupted his thoughts. Another Dominion fleet had gone silent. No distress call, no wreckage found. Just gone. The crew waited for Vorth's orders. Weeks ago, he would have ordered pursuit, retaliation, something to reassert control. Now he said nothing. What would be the point? Chasing ghosts through wormholes they barely understood? Instead, he ordered full evacuation of 3 border sectors, knowing High Command would rage at the decision. Let them. He would not feed more soldiers into this quiet grinder of a war. Hours later, as his fleet repositioned, a human transmission arrived across all Dominion channels. It was the first image of Admiral Reyes. She appeared not as a towering conqueror or snarling predator, but calm, uniform neat, eyes steady as if addressing diplomats rather than enemies. Her voice carried no malice, no heat, only certainty. "Dominion forces," she said, "your positions are compromised. Continued resistance serves no purpose. Withdraw, or we will dismantle what remains of your fleets. Civilian lives will be spared. Your choice decides the rest." The transmission ended. Silence held the bridge like a physical weight. One officer muttered, almost to himself, "She speaks like it's already over." Vorth felt the same chill. Reyes had delivered no threats, only terms, as though the outcome no longer depended on Dominion decisions at all. Later, alone in his quarters, Vorth replayed the message until the lights dimmed for ship's night cycle. He studied her face, her tone, the precision of her words. No arrogance, no desperation. She spoke like someone who had prepared her entire life for this moment and found it proceeding exactly as planned. And he realized then that the central conflict was no longer merely dominion versus humanity. It was belief itself. His empire believed in control, in power displayed through fear and spectacle. Humanity believed in something quieter, harder to kill, a unity born not of conquest but survival, sharpened across centuries of war until no empire could intimidate it again. Kreth entered quietly, breaking Vorth's thoughts. High Command demands we hold the core systems at all costs, he reported. His tone made clear what he thought of their demands. At all costs, Vorth repeated softly. He turned back to the viewport where distant stars burned cold and indifferent. How many times had the Dominion ordered worlds taken at all costs? How many species had fallen under that phrase, believing resistance hopeless against such power? Now the words felt hollow. Prepare the defenses, Vorth said at last. But tell the crews the truth. Kreth hesitated. Sir, tell them, Vorth said, voice low, we hold because the humans allow it, not because we can stop them. Kreth left without replying. Vorth remained by the viewport long after, watching the dark between stars where human fleets moved unseen. He thought of Admiral Reyes, of the soldiers laughing through ancient wars, of the calm voice marking each Dominion loss like clockwork. For the first time in his career, he understood how empires died, not in fire and fury, but in the quiet realization that the future no longer belonged to them. And somewhere beyond the darkness, he felt certain, Admiral Reyes was already planning the final blow. The Dominion's capital world had never known silence. Its skies were usually filled with the hum of defense fleets, its cities roaring with the confidence of an empire that had not lost a war in centuries. Now, the skies were empty, the streets subdued, as if the entire planet held its breath. High Admiral Vorth stood on the command balcony of the central citadel, watching as the last of the Dominion fleets formed above the world. It was everything High Command had left. Dozens of capital ships, hundreds of escorts, defense platforms bristling with weapons. A final wall against the inevitable. He felt the weight of what was coming, though no one had yet spoken it aloud. Around him, governors and admirals moved with brittle determination, issuing orders with voices too loud, too forced, as though volume alone could hide their fear. Then the first wormholes opened. They split the void with silent precision, dozens at once, surrounding the system like the tightening of a noose. Human fleets emerged in formation, not rushing, not posturing. Each ship moved into position with mathematical exactness, a choreography of war unlike anything the Dominion had faced before. The enemy had expected a desperate charge, a bellowing demand for surrender, perhaps even negotiation. Instead, humanity brought silence, the cold professionalism of soldiers ending a war already won. Vorth watched from the balcony as Admiral Reyes herself appeared on the central holoscreen, her calm face broadcast to the entire planet. She did not raise her voice. "This is your final notice," she said. "Evacuate your military personnel. Lay down weapons. No civilian centers will be harmed. Continued resistance will be dismantled." High Command erupted in outrage behind Vorth, voices overlapping in panic and fury. "Unacceptable," one governor shouted. "We are not savages to be dictated to by primitives." Vorth said nothing. He watched the human fleets closing the perimeter like jaws. They did not fire. They simply waited, weapons ready but silent, as if giving the Dominion a chance to choose dignity over destruction. When High Command voted to resist, ordering every ship and platform to open fire, Vorth gave no approval, but neither did he countermand them. He simply watched as the Dominion unleashed everything it had left in a storm of light and fire. The humans moved before the first volley struck. Wormholes bloomed across the battle space, swallowing incoming fire, spitting it back against the Dominion's own fleets. Platforms detonated as precision strikes gutted their cores in seconds. Entire squadrons vanished under invisible assaults, their systems shredded by electronic warfare the Dominion had no defense against. It was over in less than an hour. The humans advanced without haste, disabling ships instead of destroying them, boarding stations with surgical teams that cut power and seized control before defenders understood what was happening. Resistance crumbled into chaos. Admirals screamed conflicting orders until communications went dark one by one, entire chains of command collapsing in real time. On the balcony, Vorth watched the Empire die. Not with the grand final battle High Command had promised its people. Not with heroes or martyrs or speeches about honor. The Dominion died like prey taken by a predator too fast, too precise, too far ahead to fight. And through it all, Admiral Reyes never raised her voice. When the guns fell silent, she appeared again on the central display. Around Vorth, surviving governors waited for terms of execution, for enslavement, for the vengeance empires always took when power changed hands. Instead, Reyes spoke simply. The Dominion fleet will stand down. Civilian government will remain intact under supervision. High Command officers will surrender immediately. There will be no reprisals if compliance is complete. No one spoke. The terms made no sense. Conquerors always demanded blood, humiliation, territory. Yet the humans asked only for order, as though this war had never been about conquest at all. One governor finally found his voice. "Why spare us?" he demanded, the words cracking with disbelief. "After all we did to you?" Reyes regarded him coolly. "Because this was never about revenge. Humanity does not need your worlds. We need the war to end." And in that moment Vorth understood what his own leaders had not. The humans had not fought for territory or tribute or glory. They fought because the Dominion had awakened something older, harder, forged across centuries of surviving themselves. They fought because no one would ever be allowed to threaten them again. The surrender was signed within the hour. Later, as the human fleets withdrew to orbit, leaving Dominion cities untouched, Vorth found himself summoned to the captured command center. Admiral Reyes awaited him there, hands clasped behind her back as she studied a holographic map of the system. Up close, she was not what he expected. No theatrical conqueror, no cruel spark in her eyes. Just steady composure, as if even victory carried no triumph for her. "You'll be offered the position of planetary governor," she said without preamble. "Under Provisional Alliance administration." Vorth blinked. "Alliance?" "Humanity," Reyes said, "and whatever remains of the Dominion, if it chooses to adapt." He almost laughed. The idea of the Dominion adapting to being ruled by those it had once called vermin would have been absurd months ago. Now it felt inevitable. "You could have destroyed us," Vorth said finally. Reyes studied the map, her expression unreadable. "Destruction is easy. Stability is harder. We didn't fight to become you." That struck deeper than any threat. Vorth left the command center hours later, long after the human fleets began reorganizing occupied sectors. He stepped onto the balcony overlooking the capital as night fell across the city. The stars above were sharp and cold, and among them moved the silhouettes of human warships, silent sentinels watching a defeated empire. For the first time in his life, Vorth felt the shape of history changing beyond anything the Dominion had imagined. The galaxy would not return to the way it had been. Power had shifted, quietly but completely, into human hands. And as he stood there, a single truth settled over him with the finality of gravity itself. The humans had not come for conquest. They had come to make sure no one ever woke them this way again.